All right, ladies and gentlemen, the American Revolution Part 3. This is the final step to wrapping up the war. We just got done, as a recap, learning about some of the events that took place in the West with George Rogers Clark and Herr Bayer Hamilton, along with the impact of Morristown and Valley Forge, and the turning point in the Revolution, which was Saratoga. So moving forward, the war is going to shift and transition to the South under the leadership for the British of Henry Clinton. And the Southern Campaign, this is the lead into your assignment that I gave you for your research. So those of you that haven't taken care of that, this is the top part of the Excel spreadsheet that's included on Edmodo. And anyway, it kind of explains the impact and the purpose of the Southern Campaign. Basically, in 1778, the British changed their strategy. They failed to cut the New England colonies off with the loss at Saratoga. General Howe was unsuccessful at capturing Washington and controlling the middle colonies, even though he did conquer Philadelphia. And Henry Clinton decided to move the war after France's decision to get involved to the South. The reason they went to the South mainly had to do with all the secret loyalists that were down there and the fact that the British wanted to control our economic and agricultural influence that were coming out of the South. And he wanted to utilize the local militia for his benefit and hopefully be able to control the South enough to where he could march up and have an army come from the South to push Washington closer to him, and he was going to stick around in New York, keep Washington occupied. So anyway, then I had you guys do a research project about all the different battles and focus your attention on the war itself in the South. When we were done and we came back to that is when I showed you the movie The Patriot. And the focus on the Patriot was to give you a sense of the guerrilla warfare that took place and the reason why the militia was so vital. The character of the Patriot is really designed around Francis Marion, and he was known as the Swamp Fox. And they made stories about him and said that the devil couldn't even catch the Swamp Fox. But Francis Marion and his guerrilla tactics defined the fighting in the South. And so hopefully by the time it was all said and done, when we finished the movie The Patriot, you had a good sense of how important that colonial militia was in winning the war in the South. Even the loyalists used the hit-and-run tactics that were, used by the militia of the Patriots, and it was just absolutely brutal tactics that the British had no idea how to handle. And so eventually guys like Tarleton would kind of adopt some of these tactics and use them against the Americans as well. Our focus on the war in the South really had to do with the taking of their most important city, which was Charlestown, South Carolina, and Savannah. Those were the two main port cities that they used, and when the British came in and took those, that gave them the foothold they needed. And what Cornwallis was told was he was to conquer and control the South and progress his way to the North, all the while keeping, recruiting slaves and recruiting loyalists to join his forces. He was able to defeat handedly the first major engagement he had against the regular army after taking, about 5,000 of our soldiers at South Carolina, or at Charleston. At the Battle of Camden in South Carolina, he faced Gates, who fled and ran away, never to be heard from again for the rest of the war. And that was fairly embarrassing. So Washington replaced Gates with someone he could trust, Nathaniel Greene, who is now in control of the Southern campaign of the war, while Washington stayed outside of New York, watching over to see what General Clinton was going to do. And again, Nathaniel Greene was very motivating. He got the people to fight and to stand up and to do what they had to do to survive and keep fighting in the South. His successes came at a couple battles. The Battle of Cowpens, which is seen here, was actually led by Daniel Morgan, who we know from his fame of Saratoga and all of his sharpshooters that kept Burgoyne's army from being able to just flow down into New York. Now he's down in the south with Nathaniel Greene and helping lead the charge there. And anyway, the movie that we saw basically took the Battle of Cowpens and the Battle of Guilford Courthouse and turned them into one battle. But it would be at Guilford Courthouse where the two armies would actually clash, and I'll show you on the map here in a second how that was the first real big impact that Nathaniel Greene was able to make. And it turned Cornwallis around so that he had to stay in the south for a little while longer. And you guys saw this battle and how the militia line faltered and kind of backed up, and then the British rushed in. And it was a very good strategy, and really we just a lot of times outsmarted the British when it came to fighting in these battles. And here's the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, which again the Patriot predominantly emphasizes, but they take the victory of Cowpens and put it into this battle. So give you a look right here, and I wanted to take some time to show you these and emphasize this whole thing started here at Charlestown, and then Cornwallis will march up here and fight at Camden against Gates and win. And then he continues on, and everything is looking good, and then all of a sudden he runs into all these militia and starts facing these guerrilla tactics. And then here is kind of introduces Daniel Morgan. Daniel Morgan heads this direction. Cornwallis kind of heads south as he's dealing with these different issues of militia attacking him. He divides his army and he continues to go north. In the meantime, he sends Tarleton, the guy that the movie Tavington, that character plays, and Daniel Morgan and Tarleton have a great battle here at Cowpens, and that's our first major victory. Then there's kind of a side battle here with Ferguson, who is pretty much leading an entire army of loyalists, and they end up fighting a bunch of frontier settlers that are also patriots, and they battle at Kings Mountain. Really, Ferguson was the only British officer, redcoat, that was actually at the Battle of Kings Mountain. And ultimately that was a victory here. Cornwallis continues on his path. Everything's heading where he wants to go. He's having, limited issues against Francis Marion and guys like Sumter and Pickens, and he's heading north. He gets all the way into Virginia, and then he finds out that there is an American army led by Greene down here at Guilford Courthouse, and it would be there that he comes down and fights a great battle and ends up losing, but sustains heavy losses. And so Nathaniel Greene heads south to try to get Cornwallis to follow him. Cornwallis takes the bait for a little while and then decides that he's going to head towards the sea and reinforce himself here at Wilmington, and then he makes a beeline straight up here so that he can get to where Washington is supposed to be headed, which is towards Virginia. And that brings forth the probably the biggest battle and biggest impact would be what takes place at Yorktown. And that's made possible mainly because of Washington and the French finally connecting, finally hooking up, and Rochambeau and Cornwallis, Rochambeau and Washington are going up against Cornwallis, and the French Navy is able to kind of come in and trap the British by stopping the British fleet that comes down. Admiral Graves was sent down by Clinton once he realized Washington was gone. Washington escaped from New York and went and met Rochambeau in Baltimore, Maryland, and when that happened, Admiral Graves was sent to back up Cornwallis, and the British were stopped by the French fleet at the Battle of the Capes, which you guys read about. And so therefore George Washington's able to trap Cornwallis. This is kind of what it looked like. You have Cornwallis trapped in here, the French fleet out here, French lines over here, and then the Americans. And basically from this vantage point, the Americans are able to lay siege to the city. Tarleton, in the meantime, is chasing around Lafayette. Washington sends Lafayette down during the summertime of 1781 to try to keep the British occupied. And you can see that Tarleton and Cornwallis chase their tail around and try to chase down Lafayette. And in the meantime, Lafayette kind of is biding time while Rochambeau and Washington can come from down here to surround Cornwallis, where he ends up entrenching himself here at Yorktown. And here's where Graves came down from New York and ended up fighting a battle off the Chesapeake. And so this was just ideal. It was perfect, perfect planning and perfect setup. And so what they did is they laid siege to blockade and control the city, not allowing anything in or out of Yorktown. And they followed that up with an invasion and had to, go over some nasty parapets here that were, predominantly set up and designed around keeping them out, but also made by all the slaves that they had brought and the African Americans that the British had put to work and were starving behind these ramparts. But anyway, with the invasion came the final surrender, and in October of 1781, Lord Cornwallis surrenders, for the most part ending the revolution. But you guys know that all wars don't end until there's a treaty signed, and the Treaty of Paris in 1783 ensured that, and the recognition of independence was guaranteed. We got a ton of land, lots of it, which we'll have issues about later on. Fishing rights off the Canadian coast. We give Spain the opportunity to have Florida back after they lost it from the French and Indian War. And obviously the new role for Native or African Americans and women just changes everything. This is the beginning of the end to slavery, and women's rights begin. The revolution transformed our country, not just for getting us a new country, but also creating new ideas that we're going to build on from here. One thing the British asked us to do was to return all the property that we had taken from Loyalists, and essentially we said, no, not going to happen, and they turned into Canadians for fear of reprisal. And anyway, that brings kind of an end to this unit, and we're going to have lots of issues deciding who gets what later on, and that's going to be part of the next unit. And so here is your study guide and your terms and things that you need to know. And I wish you luck, study well, and if you have questions, take a look at all these terms and go back and find them in the story that was mentioned. Guys like von Steuben and his training methods at Valley Forge and how they shaped us and gave us our legacy of who we are to become, from more people dying to smallpox and the process of inoculation. I mean, this unit was pretty in-depth, and I hope you enjoyed it and hope you like it, and good luck on your test.